Hello student, I'm Mr. Lam. In this video, I'm going to talk about the coordination in humans, especially the nervous system. So I will focus on the concept of identifying the consequence of damages in different parts of nervous system. And so we are going to apply what we learn in biology and identify what is the symptoms of such injury in our nervous system. So before we go into the topic, I would like to remind you all the study skills. So remember that we need to memorize something. It is a must. So for example, we need to know all the scientific terms and all the definitions first. And then when we study or investigate those biological phenomena, so we need to use some guiding questions or key questions to make up our own logic, to express ourselves in a very logical way and also apply the knowledge. So that's a way for us to construct the knowledge and also clarify the concepts. First of all, we need to talk about the nervous system before we really know what will be the consequence of the damages in the nervous system. So remember that for the central nervous system and also the peripheral nervous system, we need to know that when we cut the human being, cut the human body in the middle, so for the brain, for the spinal cord, they will be the central nervous system, and actually they are the boss, okay, to collect the information and then analyze the information and make the decision. So that's why for the central nervous system, they will send the nerve impulse to the PNS. Also, they will receive the nerve impulse from the PNS. And for the peripheral nervous system, we have the cranial nerve and spinal nerve. Actually, they will link the receptors and effectors to and from the central nervous system. So you will know that actually the functions, okay, they are correlated, okay, and they are cooperating with each other to construct the whole nervous system of our human body. So for the central nervous system, I would like to recall once again that they are the boss, so that's why they are making the decision, they are analyzing the impulse, they are coordinating the muscular movement in our body. So control, coordinate, and last but not least, okay, for the CNS, they are also acting as the reflex center for the involuntary actions. Secondly, we are going to study the cells in our nervous system. So they are the neurons or the nerve cell. So actually we have three types of neurons: sensory neurons, interneurons, and also the motor neurons. And the main point is that when we talk about the transmission of the nerve impulse, what we are focusing on is the direction. It's just like the transport of the blood or the transport of the water or minerals or food inside the plant. What we need to focus on is the direction. So for the sensory neurons, they transmit the nerve impulse from receptor to the CNS. And for the interneurons, they transmit the nerve impulse within the CNS. And also the motor neuron, they transmit the nerve impulse from the CNS to the effector. So the point is that by using the diagram, we can know that the sensory neuron, they are linked, they are connected to the receptor. And for the motor neuron, they are connected to the muscle, to the effector. Okay, so the point is that remember the direction. And one point I would like to mention is the axon and also the dendron. I have already talked about this in the lesson. So for the axon, remember A for away from the cell body. So axon, it is the nerve fiber which is transmitting the nerve impulse away from the cell body. And also the dendron, which is the nerve fiber which is transmitting the nerve impulse towards the cell body of the neuron. So that's the main concept. We need to know it first. And after that, because we are going to talk about the damages of the certain part in our nervous system, so we need to know that will it also affect our actions, including the voluntary action and involuntary action. We shall talk about it in the next slide. So the first part we need to talk about is the voluntary action. So remember that voluntary actions are initiated by the cerebrum, so that's why it's under the conscious control. And there are two pathways or two neural pathways of the new voluntary actions. One, pathway 1, it consists of the stimulus. 1, 2, 3, 4. So after we talk about the neurons, we are going to talk about the voluntary action and involuntary action, because once we need to study the damages of the certain part in our nervous system, we need to know that will it also affect the voluntary or the involuntary action. So for the voluntary action, I need to recall that the voluntary actions are initiated by the cerebrum, so that's why it's under the conscious control, and there are two different pathways of voluntary actions. So pathway 1, it consists of stimulus, so that's why pathway 1 is in response to the stimulus. And for the pathway 2, actually this action is initiated spontaneously by the cerebrum. So the simple idea is that when we listen the alarm clock, okay, and then we know that that's means something. For example, that's 1 o'clock, also we need to have lunch or something like this. Or when we are taking the examination, once the invigilator says that time's up, pen's down, so that's the stimulus, and then we need to put down the pen, okay. And for the pathway 2, actually is initiated by ourselves, by the cerebrum, okay. So that means, for example, we would like to hold the pen and then write some words, okay. So actually we start the action by ourselves. And I would like to recall one thing is that because the neural pathway, the length of the neural pathway, it will affect the speed of the action. So the point is that the longer the neural path, the action will be slower. And the shorter is the neural path, okay, the faster the action is. So that's the main concept of the voluntary action. And also for the reflex action and reflex arc, okay. So in the lesson we have already talked about the unconscious, involuntary and rapid reaction or response in order to protect our body. So apart from this, I would like to mention that why is the reflex action is so fast, so rapid, because cerebrum is not involved, and also that's why the same stimulus also initiates the same response. For example, we touch the pin or touch a hot object accidentally, so we shall initiate the reflex action, the withdrawal reflex, okay. Or someone is hit on our kneecap, so we have the knee jerk reflex. Same stimulus always initiate the same response because the cerebrum is not involved. And you can compare it with the voluntary action because cerebrum is involved for the voluntary action. So that's why once we receive the same stimulus, we shall or we can perform different response. And for the reflex arc, actually that's the specific nervous pathway in the reflex action. So it consists of the receptor, sensory neuron, reflex center. It can be spinal cord or medulla oblongata in our brain, and then motor neuron, and then effector. So that's the reflex arc. That's the nervous pathway involved in the reflex action. And for this green dotted line, okay, pointing towards the cerebrum, actually that's the way, okay, to transmit the nerve impulse to the cerebrum for the sensation. So that's why once we accidentally touch the pin, once we perform the withdrawal reflex, we can still feel the pain. And for this diagram, actually I would like to recall the concept of the dorsal root and also the ventral root, okay. So for the dorsal root, because there is a structure called dorsal root ganglion, because it consists of the cell body of the sensory neuron here. And for the ventral root, actually is relatively smooth because there is no a ganglion here, because the cell body, it is inside the gray matter of the spinal cord. So in this part, I would like to recall the concept of reflex arc. Also, the nerve or the nerve impulse will be transmitted to the dorsal root first, and then go into the gray matter of the spinal cord. and then the nerve impulse will be transmitted to the motor neuron and along the ventral root to the effector. So that's the reflex arc. So after we talk about the part of the terminology, we are going to move on to the other part of the observation, the damage of the spinal cord. So what we are going to study is that the consequence when the spinal cord is damaged. And the simple idea is that damage to the spinal cord will cut off the communication between the brain and the parts of the body below the damage zone. So when we study the case, we need to be aware of the position of the damage. So for example, in this part, the damage is at the neck zone. So the point is that the communication between the lower part of the body, the arm, the trunk and the legs, okay, the communication between these parts and the brain will be cut off. And if the damaged part is at this part, so the communication between the arms with the brain, they are still be functional, but the communication between the brain and also and the legs, okay, so this communication will be cut off. So the point is, we have 3 dimensions for us to study, to think about that, is that if a certain part of the spinal cord is damaged, can the man feel the pain, okay, any sensation, or can the man withdraw the arm when accidentally touch a pin, okay, so that's the withdrawal reflex. Can the man perform the reflex action? And can the man move the arm voluntarily? That means we are focusing on the voluntary action. So in these 3 dimensions, we can study what will be the consequence, and these all questions are based on the logic, are based on the terminology. We talked about that in previous slides. So in this part, apart from the damage of the spinal cord, we expand the idea a bit more to the damage of the nervous system. And then we are going to study what will be the consequence when the neurons A, B, C, D, E is damaged. So the point is that in this part, okay, neurons A, B, C, D, E, they can be damaged, okay, in certain way, A, B, C, D, E. So at least the point is that we need to know what is A, B, C, D, E. A, that's the sensory neuron, because we know that is connected with the receptor. And for B, it is the interneuron, because they are in the central nervous system. And also C is the motor neuron, because it's connected with the effector. And for the D and E, of course, they are also in the CNS, they are interneuron. And for D, it is the interneuron connecting or transmitting the nerve impulse towards the sensory area of the cerebrum. And for the E, it is the interneuron, okay, transmitting the nerve impulse from the motor area of the cerebrum to the effector, okay, to the motor neuron and then to the effector. So at least for this part, neuron A, B, C, D, E, they can be possibly damaged. And apart from them, of course, the receptor or the effector or even the brain, they can be damaged as well. But in this part, I would like to focus on the case of all the neurons, okay? Because for the damage of the receptor or damage of the effector, they are simple case, okay? Because once the receptors, they are damaged, somehow they cannot detect the stimulus at all. So of course, no sensation at all. And also for the muscle, for the effector, if they are damaged, so actually even the nerve impulse, they are being transmitted to the effector, the muscle cannot contract at all. So that's a simple case. So that's why I would like to focus on the cases of A, B, C, D, E. So there are also the 3 dimensions for us to study. Can the man feel the pain? Can the man withdraw the arm and accidentally touch a pin? Or can the man move his arm voluntarily? Okay, these 3 main directions for us. So that's also the typical daily life scenario. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 scenarios actually they are just related to the neuron A, B, C, D, E, sensory nerve, interneuron in reflex arc, motor nerve, and also interneuron to the sensory area of the cerebrum is damaged, and also the interneuron from the motor area of the cerebrum is damaged. These 5 typical cases. So for the guiding question, we need to think about that. Once a certain part of the nervous system or a certain type of the neuron, they are damaged. So what will be the consequence? We have 3 guiding questions for us. So can the nerve impulse be transmitted from the receptor to the CNS? That's about the sensory neuron. And also, can the nerve impulse be transmitted to the effector from the CNS? That's about the motor neuron. And also, can the interneuron relay the nerve impulse among the neurons? So for example, the interneuron in the reflex arc. Okay, so that's a very key point for the reflex arc to perform its function well. Okay, so remember the direction, and also how can the nerve impulse be transmitted from one neuron to the other neuron to construct a complete neural pathway. So for the case 1, state what is the consequence when the sensory neuron A is damaged. So the point is that once the neuron A is damaged, once even the receptor detect the stimulus, okay, it cannot transmit the nerve impulse along A to B because neuron A is damaged. So that's why the man cannot feel the pain. And so how about the man? Can he withdraw his arm when accidentally touch a pin? So the point is that for the reflex arc, recall the pathway of the reflex arc, A, B, and then C. That's a reflex arc, right? Okay, sensory neuron, interneuron, and then motor neuron. But the point is that for this reflex arc, it is not complete at all because neuron A is damaged. So that's why he cannot withdraw the arm by the withdrawal reflex. So how about, can he move his arm voluntarily? Even the sensory neuron is damaged. But the point is that for the motor neuron, actually is complete, is still intact. So from the neuron E, interneuron, from the motor area of the cerebrum, it can generate the nerve impulse, and then the neuron E can transmit the nerve impulse to the motor neuron and then stimulate the effector, the muscle. So that's why he can move his arm voluntarily. So at least the point is that we call the 3 guiding question for us. Okay, and also you can take a look at the reflex arc, okay, for the second dimension. And for the case 2, the interneuron, okay, B in the reflex arc is damaged. So for part A, okay, for neuron A is intact, is complete. Okay, so the receptor generate the nerve impulse, and the nerve impulse can be transmitted along the neuron A. And then once the nerve impulse is transmitted to the spinal cord, okay, so how can it be transmitted to the sensory area of the cerebrum? And the answer is positive, yes. Okay, so the man can feel the pain. Okay, so how about, can he withdraw his arm by the withdrawal reflex? So let's see the reflex arc, part A, part B, and part C. Neuron B is damaged, so that's why the reflex arc is not complete at all. So that's why he cannot withdraw his arm by the withdrawal reflex. So how about, can he move his arm voluntarily? Neuron C, motor neuron, okay. And then for the neuron E is also complete, okay, not damaged at all. So the nerve impulse can be transmitted along neuron E and then along neuron C to the effector. So that's why he can withdraw his arm or move his arm voluntarily. So it's a very strange case because this man can feel the pain, but he cannot perform the withdrawal reflex. So the point is that you may think, no, this man cannot protect himself at all. But actually, because he can withdraw his arm voluntarily, so somehow he can protect himself, but by the voluntary action, but not the reflex action. Once he feel the pain, and then he analyzed that, oh, why is my finger, okay, painful? So, and then he takes a look and his finger, and then find that, oh, there is a pin. So he will withdraw his arm, move his arm voluntarily. So for the case 3, motor neuron C is damaged. So we can see that neuron C is damaged. But the point is that can the man feel the pain? Of course, yes, because neuron A is intact, and also neuron D is also intact, so he can feel the pain. But can he withdraw his arm by the withdrawal reflex? And the answer is of course no, because for the ABC reflex arc, it is not complete. So that's why he cannot withdraw his arm by the withdrawal reflex. So can he move his arm voluntarily? And also the answer is no, because the neuron C is damaged. Even there is a new nerve impulse generated by the cerebrum, and the nerve impulse is transmitted along the neuron E to the spinal cord, but the neuron C is damaged, so the nerve impulse cannot be transmitted along neuron C to the muscle. And for the case 4, interneuron of the spinal cord, okay, to the sensory area of the cerebrum is damaged. So can the man feel the pain? Of course not, because even the nerve impulse can be transmitted along the neuron A, the sensory neuron, to the spinal cord, but the nerve impulse cannot be transmitted to the sensory area of the cerebrum at all. And can he withdraw his arm by the reflex action? And the answer is yes, because for A, B, C, the reflex arc is intact, right? Okay, so he can withdraw his arm by the withdrawal reflex. And can the man move his arm voluntarily? Of course yes, because the neuron E is also complete, is intact, okay, and neuron C is also intact. So for this part, he cannot feel the pain, but he can perform the withdrawal reflex. So this man may feel very strange. Oh, why my arm, okay, is withdrawal automatically, okay, but I cannot feel anything, okay. But somehow he can just take a look at his finger, and then he will find the pin, okay. So for the case 5, interneuron from the motor area to the spinal cord. So the point is that, can he feel the pain? Of course yes, because A and then D, okay, both these two neurons, they are intact. And can the man withdraw his arm by the reflex action? Of course yes, because ABC, the reflex arc is complete, okay. But can the man move his arm voluntarily? And the answer is no, because for the motor area, even it generates the nerve impulse, the nerve impulse cannot be transmitted to the spinal cord along neuron E. So that's why even neuron C is intact, no nerve impulse will be transmitted to the effector. So that's the case of the paralyzed. But somehow he can still perform the withdrawal reflex. Okay, so for example, even he cannot move his arm, but if he touch a pin or touch a hot object accidentally, he can still withdraw his arm by the reflex action, but not voluntary action. So after we study the 5 typical cases, so we are going to take a look at an exercise, a question in the HKCE level. So for these 2 questions, it's talking about the withdrawal reflex when a person touch a hot object. So let's apply what we learned in the previous slide and the guiding questions and also the terminology. Okay, so the first question is that how many neurons are involved in the reflex arc of this withdrawal reflex? Because it is a withdrawal reflex but not the knee-jerk reflex, so you need to identify or compare the difference between the withdrawal reflex and also the knee-jerk reflex. And the second question is that in an accident, the dorsal root of the man was damaged at position X. Okay, so that's the dorsal root of the spinal cord. So what would happen if the man touched a hot object in a dark room? That means accidentally. So in this question, actually there are only 2 dimensions. Okay, but in our video, we are talking about 3 dimensions. So at least we only apply a part what we learned here to this question. So I give you some time to do this question, and then you can check the answer by yourself. Any question, you can leave your message in the message box below. It's okay. So see you later. Bye bye.